Hello and welcome to a Trialogue by ETRetail on the state of supply chain, challenges and opportunities in the retail space. After concluding the successful third edition of ETRetail Supply Chain Summit, we bring to you a powerful trialogue featuring Kavitha, Managing Director, Accenture, and Hemant Badri, SVP, Group Head of Supply Chain and Customer Experience, Flipkart. Welcome, Kavitha, and welcome, Hemant, to our trialogue.
Thank you, Charu.
Thanks, Charu.
So without further ado, let's know from our esteemed panelists how supply chain industry is evolving in India and delve deeper into the opportunities and challenges that the industry holds. So, Kavitha, my first question is to you. In India, how has the supply chain as a function evolved over the years?
Thanks, Charu. Thanks to include us as part of the trialogue. Great to be here today. I think I can talk about the last 2 decades, and I see that there has been a tremendous change in terms of how supply chain has evolved. I remember a time when I started my career back in 2000, and that was when a lot of thinking around supply chain was just about evolving, particularly looking at supply chain as an end-to-end function that has a significant impact on the business. Concepts such as theory of constraints existed, but new ideas such as network design or capacity constraint production planning were all evolving. And I remember a time where we were trying to solve an optimization problem with a large number of SKUs, production locations, distribution locations, and so on. And we could not solve it at the first shot because of the lack of computing power. Fast forward to today, things have dramatically changed, and we can look at supply chains in a very, very nuanced fashion, both on the product as well as on the customer dimension. Network design is something that everybody in the retail space keeps talking about and is working on all the time to rebalance and optimize their costs. A lot of new automation functionalities have come in, both in the manufacturing space, on the production shop floor, as well as in distribution. And more importantly, this is having a very positive impact on the business. There are clear ROIs that can be defined around it. The complexity on the last mile has increased, but so has our ability to manage some of that complexity in a big fashion. And finally, I think all organizations are placing a big focus on sustainability, and rightly so. And people are starting to look at what it means in every step along the supply chain. So I would say there has been a tremendous change, in the years, and supply chains in India have evolved significantly, and more so in the retail context.
So we can say all thanks to technology for that.
I would say technology is a great enabler, but there are so many other elements that sit along with it as well.
So Hemant, what are your thoughts? In your opinion, how has the supply chain changed for your brand, specifically Flipkart?
Yeah, I think a good question, Charu. I think what has happened is, as the e-commerce adoption is increasing in this country, and what we do is we enable for all the customer to experience all the selection, which could be possibly not accessible in tier 2, tier 3. So I think important is the reach has changed in a big way. Okay, we cover almost every pin code in this country. That's a big change. Second thing is the infrastructure and logistic landscape in this country is rapidly changing, whether it is highways to a possibly grade A warehouses, and everything is through very strong technology enablement, which helps you to track and trace and get better visibility. So I think e-commerce has been a blessing during the COVID times as well. And it is the reach which is making it a different. And at the same time, you create accessible, affordable and reliable supply chain. That's the foundation of any supply chain. Far more so, it amplifies in e-commerce because every order is going to a customer. So for every order, you need to be, that reliable, that affordable and accessible for every customer. So that's the thing we experience, and that's what we strive to achieve every day.
So yes, true that the customer demands are different for e-commerce as compared to the brick and mortar stores, that the supply chain function has to work differently for them, right? Yeah. So Kavitha, my next question is to you. According to you, what are the 3 biggest priorities on the supply chain front over the next 3 years?
Sure, Charu. I would say that, of course, there are many different priorities, but if we needed to look at what are the three most important priorities, I would say number one is having a customer-centric supply chain that is able to meet the needs of customers based on what they actually want, right? What kind of service levels, what kind of speeds of delivery, what kind of personalization are they looking for? The second important aspect, and it is a very important aspect, is cost efficiency. This is something that we need to deliver because the profitability of any retail business is dependent on that. And I would say the third important priority today is sustainability. How can we really start looking at what is happening across the end-to-end supply chain? What is the quantum of emissions? And is there a possibility for us to really look at reducing those? If we are able to meet these three priorities, I would say we are actually able to create a future-ready supply chain. It is going to come on the backdrop of a certain amount of reinvention. It is going to come on a foundation of a very strong digital core. And at the same time, looking at the nuances, whether it is an efficient last mile, whether it is the entire network in itself, what kind of fulfillment capabilities are needed. If you are an omni-channel retailer, is it about looking at dark stores or gray stores or micro fulfillment centers? So there are a whole host of elements that one needs to consider in order to create a future-ready supply chain. But in conclusion, I would say that retailers really need to start focusing on a more service-focused strategy in the supply chain space. For the longest period of time, we have looked at moving products. But maybe the question now is, how can we look at a service-focused strategy that is really able to support the needs of the various customer segments in a very reliable fashion and with a high level of exceptional service, particularly in terms of those moments that actually matter, right? Those moments that are really going to enhance the customer experience. So I would say these are the most important priorities in today's world.
So Hemant, while Kavitha talked about the future-ready supply chains, what is expected going ahead, there must be some challenges at present time also. What are the challenges that you are facing and how can these can be resolved, in your opinion?
Thanks, Charu. And I think Kavitha touched upon the key, trends and what we need to focus on. I think if you look at challenges for current retail supply chain, first and the foremost is we live in a VUCA world, and demand volatility, okay, is given. And how you design your supply chain, which is agile, and how do you design your supply network, where to hold inventory, how to hold inventory, and that how do you use some of the advanced technology of forecasting to also replenishment can be one of the challenge, and that's evident. Second thing is uncertainty around global trade, yeah, because we live in a global village and everything is so interconnected. Any of the dimension can cause larger impact. So being aware and building the resilience, yeah, supply chain is all about resilience with all those factors, and that could be today competitive advantage for a business, and in an environment where you are able to anticipate, predict, and use that can be a differentiator. And third element would be always, how are you really scaling up personalized, efficient fulfillment, keeping customer at the center, because that would continue to be challenge as you expand reach. There will be always, kind of natural calamities. Some of the challenges in every geography has a different nuances. So how do you keep that focus? So how your supply chain is customer obsessed, that helps you to really look at demand variability, customer obsession. How do you manage resilience? These are the three trends far more important in today's time, or I would say challenges for any supply chain.
While we talk about challenges, but we have seen that the supply chain is continuously evolving to meet the needs of customers, suppliers, and retailers alike. In recent years, new technologies have emerged that are transforming the way goods and services are delivered to consumers. Kavitha, I want to know what are some of the major trends driving the transformation in the retail supply chain, according to you?
Sure, Charu. I think there are many different elements that are actually impacting the supply chain. I would like to call out two. One is the significant evolution in consumer behavior. And consumers today, in a lot of the research that we've done, are talking about the fact that 70% of a lot of what they do is actually impacted by external factors, and because of which they are having to actually reprioritize, all through, right? And I would say that this basic fundamental shift has actually impacted how consumers today search for products, buy products, how do they actually use those products? And if it is not meeting their needs, how do they actually return? And all along the way, what kind of expectations they have around service, right? So there is a fundamental shift in consumer behavior. The second important aspect is the significant evolution in terms of technology that is happening. There are a whole host of new technologies that is coming in. Artificial intelligence is really becoming a game changer. In the supply chain space, we are seeing that a digital twin is becoming very, very relevant for us to look at modeling the supply chain, looking at supply chain resilience that Hemant spoke about, and really looking at ways and means to understand risk at different points in the supply chain and also look at mitigating risk. So there are a lot of fundamental changes which are happening both in consumer behavior as well as on the technology front. I would say the way retailers will need to respond to it is really, really create that future ready supply chain and look at what kind of reinventions might be required in their supply chain setup today, in their processes, the level of automation that they are using, and how are they actually leveraging data to derive meaningful insights, which can then be put back into the supply chain to create a better customer experience.
True that. Hemant, if you would like to add to it, can you please tell us how the brands can ensure that the supply chains are optimized and efficient as well?
Yeah, I think what technology is doing is it's empowering every Indian, whether it is seller, customer, to do a commerce online through innovation and technology. So I think technology has become a fabric for connecting millions of MSMEs to millions of customer, and you can get to know, where is your product, when it will get delivered, whether it will get delivered, can you experience open box. So supply chain has kind of a reinvented, and whether it is blockchain, whether it is IoT, and far more localized automation to suit Indian environment. So it's an exciting time. I think technology is going to just be a big enabler, and we need to keep focus on customer, seller, and ecosystem. So now it's becoming a more of a marketplace, and we as a platform helps few lakh seller to connect to millions of customer, and that is unleashing the commerce through technology.
So we talked about the opportunities, the challenges, but we have seen there are unforeseen challenges which come unprecedented. Like I mean, we had COVID in the last few years. So it disrupted the supply chain. So has it actually pushed the industry to look at supply chain risk in a different way and adopt different approach to build resilient supply chains? Kavitha, what do you have to say about it?
I would think so, Charu. In fact, I would say that in the last 3 years, retailers have seen significant swings in both demand and supply. As you rightly pointed out, it started off with the COVID pandemic, but we can also see the level of geopolitical challenges that are out there, climate actions that are coming in, weather-related challenges. There are a whole host of risks that are there. And what is interesting is the frequency of these occurrences has increased significantly. And so has the impact that each of these occurrences is causing, right? So with that context, there is definitely a need to review and relook at supply chain risk. I think before the pandemic, things were working so well. You could ship products halfway across the globe, and you could kind of be sure that it would arrive at a port in a country on time, and in the right quantities. And there were hardly any exceptions. So at one point in time, I think all of us really forgot about what supply chain risk was. And the pandemic was a wake-up call for it. But we can also see that now the pandemic is behind us, we can see that there are several other uncertain events that are coming in. And that's exactly where supply chain resilience becomes important. And the first step to building it is really being aware of the risks that are around, and understanding what those risks could do to your supply chain. And over time, build mitigation steps in terms of assessing the maturity level of the supply chain, looking at what are those different points of failure in your supply chain, and really looking at what kind of actions, be it process, be it technology or automation related options, that could actually help create a more resilient and a more agile supply chain over time. But I would say that there is a definite need to focus on it. And this is a topic that all of us need to take seriously. Because if we do not do that, we have seen one of the biggest impacts in the last couple of years. For most retailers, one of the biggest challenges, of course, has been availability and what it has meant in terms of customers switching behavior and even a lack of loyalty at one point. But it has also had an impact on affordability, for example, because a lot of retailers have experienced increases on the cost front. And at different points in time, they passed it on to customers, which has at times made specific products unaffordable for customers. And that compounded with the macroeconomic environment has definitely had an impact on both top line growth as well as bottom line profitability. And hence, there is definitely a need to look at, creating more resilient supply chains by understanding supply chain risk and creating greater visibility along the entire supply chain.
So we have to start seeing at the future and start planning accordingly. This is the need of the hour, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So Hemant, while building the supply chain for the future, what are the hiring, training, and retaining the talent? I mean, what are the practices that you are following to have a efficient supply chain for the future?
Yeah, I think very, very good question. As we are evolving and e-commerce will continue to go, upwards of 30% in times to come, it's important to have right skill set for retail. So we have a supply chain operational academy where we teach and make people understand all the supply chain activities, and few thousand people get trained every 6 weeks. That's what we are focusing on. Second dimension is extremely important to get inclusion and diversity in the workforce. So we get differently able people working with us. So we have 2,000 plus differently able people working with us. We have 10,000 plus women working with us in fulfillment center. That is going to be a kind of a key differentiator as we progress. And definitely when we are doing the skill and getting diverse people, I think supply chain is a people-centric function. How do you build career path? How do you continue to evolve their skill will be a differentiator, and that's the key. So 3 axes to it: really get diverse hiring, really continue to build training and skill, and keep learning process and growth process outlined for those who would work in future retail.
So we can say that hiring the right talent, sustainability, and apart from that, looking at the future at the right point of time can help us build the right supply chain for the future.
Yeah, that sounds appropriate. Yeah.
Yeah. So Kavitha, any closing remarks that you would like to share with us for now?
Charu, I would say that in any business, one of the fundamental outcomes or objectives is about profitable growth. And I believe that supply chain is a very important lever to be able to drive that growth. We spoke about a future-ready supply chain that is customer-centric, cost-efficient, and sustainable. The one point I would highlight is in the last couple of years, the way growth has come through, we can clearly see that the channel mix has changed tremendously. Nobody expected online to be such a large share of an omni-channel retailer. And in that context, we can very clearly say that the supply chains today are suboptimal as compared to where we would like them to be. So I would think that this is the perfect time for retailers to really look at their supply chain and see what kind of a reset is needed across the entire supply chain. This is a good time to review and look at how agile is my supply chain, how resilient is my supply chain, and how do I really create a future-ready supply chain that is focused on delivering a great customer experience. So I would say that the time is now to do that.
And supply chain being the backbone of any retail companies, for the success of any retail company, it is the need of the hour. So Hemant, any closing remarks you would like to share?
I think it's a exciting times, and supply chain is a competitive advantage for any business, and it's a center of any and every boardroom conversation. So for me, for retail, supply chain key role is making it accessible, affordable, and reliable for every Indian. So supply chain has to touch every Indian in a personalized way. And if you're able to make accessible, affordable, reliable for every Indian, that would be a delight. So that's what I would leave with the last message.
Thank you so much for joining us. We had a wonderful discussion, and I hope that there are some key takeaways that the listeners can take away from this thing. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Charu.
Thank you, Charu.
So keep watching ETRetail for many such videos, many such interviews, many such trialogues, sessions. We'll keep on bringing you the knowledge and what is happening in the industry time to time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.